Boris Johnson fought back tears at the COVID inquiry today as he issued a heartfelt apology for the pain and the loss suffered during the pandemic and reflected on the tragic year of 2020.
And it goes, because I'm afraid it's what happened. We have to be realistic about 2020, the whole year, that whole tragic year. We did lock down, but then it bounced back.
Let's go live to our correspondent, Oliver Whitfield-Miočić, who's outside the inquiry. Oliver, gosh, there's been a great deal of emotion there today. What's been going on?
Yes, that's right, Vanessa. I think from everything that was said today, it was almost a news story a minute in terms of what the Prime Minister was saying, from the decisions to go into lockdown to how the government thinking was about the pandemic. We're currently just standing by on this live shot here because former Prime Minister Boris Johnson is expected to imminently depart. I think we can see his security detail leaving now, and we'll see here there's also a group of protesters. Here he comes. Just a warning, there will be some flashing images here as the Prime Minister leaves. Boos and heckle. I don't know if you could hear that there, Vanessa, but boos and heckles as former Prime Minister Boris Johnson left. There's a mixture of different protesters who are here, from the bereaved families who clearly were not impressed with Boris Johnson's performance before the inquiry today and his evidence, to anti-lockdown and anti-vaccine protesters who were also in attendance today. Now, for those bereaved families, they are upset with the Prime Minister. They're upset that he did not follow the rules. They are upset that the lockdowns were not brought in faster, upset at the decisions by his administration to let sick people back into care home settings. They were also upset with the chair of the inquiry, Baroness Hallett, because they were there when 4 family members were kicked out of the inquiry earlier on today for holding up placards just as Boris Johnson had started to give his apology right at the start of today's hearing. And then later on in the hearing, we heard from the chair saying that family members had to control their emotions. That's because when they were hearing things that were being said at the inquiry, there was at points gasps. They're saying that this has been an incredibly emotional day, incredibly triggering for them in some places. But in terms of what we heard from Boris Johnson, I think what was quite interesting was the reasoning behind some of the actions that he took. So, for example, not attending the first 5 COBRA meetings related to the COVID emergency as it was becoming at that point. We know at the time it was Matt Hancock, the then Health Secretary, who was leading those COBRA meetings. Now, the Prime Minister says that he didn't need to be in attendance. The Prime Minister doesn't necessarily have to chair them, and so that was the reason that Mr. Hancock had been chairing those meetings. We've also heard about the Prime Minister's regrets about calling or equating long COVID to Gulf War syndrome. He says that he wished he'd never said that. About having quite a boisterous number 10 operation. He made no apology for the fact that it was quite an argumentative operation, but he thinks that it was reflective of the different viewpoints and something that he had, to the decision of keeping Matt Hancock in position. We've heard from multiple witnesses throughout the COVID inquiry so far that Mr. Hancock was unreliable. He didn't always tell the truth. But today we've heard from Boris Johnson that it was his belief, the right decision, to keep him in post because he didn't want to change a health secretary in the middle of a health crisis. Apologies for the quite loud noises you might be hearing as ambulances drive by. So it's been an emotional day for the families here, and I think really in conclusion, how you view Mr. Johnson's performance, his evidence today, will really be how you viewed him at the time that he was Prime Minister and his subsequent time after he's left. Remember, Boris Johnson is a divisive figure. He's the man that delivered Brexit, but he's also the person that many people see as not delivering when it came to the COVID pandemic. And I think that will basically be the same lens that people will view today through, either in a good light that he came, he's apologised, he's tried to give the answers as much as possible, even though there was quite a lot of, I don't recall certain events, or I can't remember exactly what was said when, but to his detractors, this will be another example of a Prime Minister who wasn't fully across the brief, who didn't necessarily know what was going on, who delegated a lot of the responsibilities to other officials, and so opinion will still remain split. And remember, we've got another, 5-6 hours of testimony tomorrow when the Prime Minister, or the former Prime Minister, returns here to Paddington.